Almost every subgun has some MP5 DNA in it. Some of them clone the whole thing, and others just copy maybe a few parts. Starting with the Springfield Kuna. So this one copies the roller delay blowback concept and repackaged them in a modern way to tame the recoil. The significance of these two steel rollers is to delay the extra milliseconds in the chamber while the pressure continues to drop. So this is how it works on the MP5. So when the bolt closes, they wedged outward into the barrel extension, and to open back up, the case has to shove them inward. But the geometry only lets that happen by throwing a much heavier chunk of steel backward first. And that's where you get the flat shooting low recoil gun without a big heavy bolt slamming around. Now on the Kuna, it's something similar where this spring-loaded rollers latch into these grooves on the receiver, and it basically delays the bolt during ejection. The next one is the CMMG Banshee that basically looks like one of your AR-15s. So they cut angled surfaces into a rotating bolt so the bolt has to twist before it can drive rearward, which multiplies the effective resistance the same way the MP5's rollers do, just with rotation instead of wedging. And this is what they look like. When the gun cycles after each shot, the bolt is always pushing against the shell as long as possible to hold that pressure until the bullet leaves the barrel. The difference on an AR-15 is that the bolt has to move first until it turns. Then this piece can unlock. On the Banshee, the pressure pushes on the spring-loaded bolt head first. Then it unlocks before the bolt moves, hence the delay blowback. The idea reportedly traces back to a .45 caliber gun from World War II, so even the alternative to the copied idea is a copied idea. The Banshee line runs it across few popular calibers, and it feels so familiar like an AR-15. So CMMG's question is a fork in the road. Do you want the MP5's mechanism, or just what it can do? Grand Power Stribog. The slowback Stribog was a plain blowback gun to make shooting 10 mil like it's a 9. But Grand Power went back and re-engineered the action around a roller anyway, and tried to do something the MP5 never did. The company was bragging about how the system tames the recoil, and also wants to charge you $1,500 for it if you really, really want one. So think about that for a second. Is roller delay blowback worth that much of a premium price to pay to gain some knockdown power, but still feels like a 9 mil? Vigran 007. Somebody put the rollers in a handgun slide. It's all steel, with a low bore axis. To make it low bored, it needs faster follow-up shot, so it just means less slide torques when you fire it. It's arguably the first new roller-delayed pistol in decades, and almost nobody will ever own one. So this one is the pure version of the question with all the practicality stripped out. Yes, delayed blowback handguns are very much a thing, though they are less common than standard short recoil systems. For example, like the famous HKP-7, the Laugo alien that flips the gas-delayed mechanism upside down to achieve virtually zero muzzle flip. Another one is the Steyr GB. How it works is that it basically taps a small amount of hot gas from the barrel into a cylinder beneath it. Then the gas pushes forward against a piston attached to the slide, physically resisting and slowing down the rearward movement of the slide until the bullet exits the barrel. But these are typically outside the price range for most people, and kinda niche in today's market. So it's more of a collector's item at this point than something you really, really need. The next one is the Century Arms AP5. And let's see what type of copying they were doing. Here's the uncomfortable part for anyone who just paid $3 grand for German. HK licensed the MP5 out for production overseas years ago, and the Turkish arsenal MKE has been building them on genuine HK tooling ever since. The AP5 is that gun, imported and wearing a different name, and reviewers keep saying the welds and the fit rival the German examples. Because in a real sense, they came off the same drawings and the same machines. There were some early quality hiccups, and the importer has a record of making those right, but the core proposition hasn't moved. So if the tooling is HK's and the blueprint is HK's, what exactly is left that you're paying Oberndorf for? Zenith ZF5. These guys were the company bringing those Turkish guns in, but the relationship broke, and instead of folding, they tooled up and started building their MP5 clones in the United States. The ZF5 launched in 2021 with modern coatings, a cold hammer forged barrel, and tighter tolerances than the guns they used to import, and it sits in the gap between the Turkish guns and the SP5 on price. They'll even build you one in 5.56, but you can kind of call it a poor man's MP5 if you want. So Zenith hands you a different trade than the AP5 did. You're giving up the direct HK tooling lineage and getting a fresh American production line with modern finishes in return. So which one is the real pedigree, the old machines or the new tolerances? PTR. So their MP5s aren't reverse engineered guesses because they have been making licensed roller guns for a while. And when Portugal's state factory finished its own licensed run, and an American company bought the entire production line outright and shipped it to South Carolina. So PTR's pitch is heritage by acquisition because you can't buy HK's tooling, but you could buy Portugal's. But these are built from scratch in America. So if someone wants a civilian copy built on actual licensed HK factory machines, they usually buy imports from companies like Turkey or Pakistan because those specific countries actually bought the real deal factory setups from Germany decades ago. Mach 5 and Mach 9. The Mach 5 is a Turkish-built MP5 clone brought in under their revived military armament corporation name. The K-sized version retails around $1,100, and the newest budget model in the same family launched at $833. That's the cheapest ticket into roller delay anyone has ever sold. And two records need correcting on this one. First, everybody calls it the Palmetto gun because Palmetto sells a ton of them, but Palmetto doesn't build it. An importer brings it in from Turkey. Second, one big retail listing literally labels the action as blowback, and the listing is wrong because it's a true roller gun. You can verify that yourself off the brass, since a roller gun's fluted chamber weaves black tiger stripes down every case it ejects. And that makes you wonder if when the copy costs less than a mid-shelf AR build, then what's the excuse for buying a plain blowback gun that kicks harder for the same price? The POF has been making some MP5s from Pakistan, and their surplus-grade guns and magazines trickle into the American market as the true budget entry. The lineage is legitimate, but the fit and finish sit a full step below the Turkish and American guns, and you can feel it in the machining and see it in the coating. So gun is there, but the polish isn't there. And that's always the question people have, like how rough are you willing to go before cheap stops being a deal? Now speaking of reliability, what mags you use do matter, which directly affect reliability. The MP5 magazine's got to be made right, or it's not going to feed on these clothes. The very first MP5 magazines were actually straight, and they fed badly with anything but round nose ammo, even though 9mm looks perfectly straight. So in 1977, HK bit the magazine into a curve that matches how tapered 9mm naturally wants to stack. And the feeding problems disappeared, and the curved one became the pattern every clone maker copies. Cheaper mags do exist, and the savings are substantial. Meanwhile, getting two mags from HK felt like getting way too ripped off, but the reliability is there. If you're counting on reliability, don't cheap out on the mags. The next one is the HK UMP. By the late 90s, HK wanted the MP5's crown for a newer gun, so they built the UMP out of polymer to make it lighter, and it shoots the 45. And then they made one bad decision, so bad that they took out the rollers this time, back to a plain blowback gun, and the recoil is now worse. So people went back to the MP5s, and the old gun outsold its own replacement. HK's own people reportedly still field more MP5 requests than UMP requests to this day. The next one is the Swiss B&T APC 9K. When the US Army went shopping for a new subcompact weapon in 2019, the Swiss APC 9 took the contract to serve these vehicle and pilot crews. And here's the part everyone gets wrong. Some people may think this is a delayed blowback gun, but it's not. That's because the APC runs a plain blowback system with a hydraulic buffer soaking up when the bolt slams back. It copied the MP5 size, but to slow down the recoil, it used a shock absorber instead of rollers. Basically, you model something that worked but doing it differently, but would you still call this like a semi-copied of the MP5? Taurus RPC. The RPC in 2026 is a roller-delayed 9mm the size of the shortest MP5s with a quick-change barrel and 32 round magazines, and their own marketing is literally pitching it as an MP5K for the hardcore fanbase, in a category that cheap straight blowback guns owned for decades. So the RPC makes you wonder whether these budget brands can sell you the rollers for way less than a real MP5. So then does the boutique premium on everything else still make sense? Okay, besides the delay roller system, that pretty much is the thing to copy, but there are also a few things that came from the MP5 era that you should know. The modular trigger system. When one agency wants a semi-only trainer, another wants a burst-limited police gun, and a third wants full auto, and building a separate gun for each would be insane. So the MP5 put its entire trigger group into a self-contained pack that pushes in and out on pins, and one receiver could become any of those roles by swapping one hand-sized module. And you can see that idea resonated with other guns as well, not limited to the MP5. Like the SIG and the Springfield Echelon. The muzzle. The muzzle was another thing that tagged along with the MP5 and it never went away. The suppressor industry copied. Unthreading a muzzle device with a hot barrel and a clock running is someone no one wants to do. So HK cut 3 lugs around the MP5's muzzle back in the 60s. Can attach these two in about a second. In fact, the Tri-Lug wasn't designed for suppressors at all at the start, so the first 3-lug suppressor didn't exist until roughly 20 years later, built by a different company entirely. and little did you know it became the fastest suppressor cam mount standard in the industry. But that's not all, because the next one is the one everyone knows. But it's not the same as the Banshee we talked about earlier. What we are talking about here is the AR9. Some shooters won't leave the AR no matter what, so let's bring the MP5 to the ARs. We do it on the AK and everything else, so why not be MP5? Like a complete roller delayed 9mm AR upper that drops onto your existing lower and no buffer. The rest just functions like an AR, and it kills weight if a buffer and everything, like the buffer spring, can be taken out. So this was the Banshee, and this is the AR9. Banshee still needed the buffer spring, and the AR9 does not. So if the MP5's one great idea can be grafted into the rifle, and really think about this, then do you need the rest of the MP5 that uses a stamped receiver at all? And if you really want an authentic MP5 with the HK stamp on it, the MP5 that the company refused to sell outside of military and law enforcement, well, the SP5 is here. It's made from the same factory in Oberndorf that builds the military ones, making them an ordinary pistol for the US customers.
There hasn't been a truly authentic semi-automatic version of the MP5 in the US until now. We've been working on this project for a long time.
So is the roll mark worth $2 extra to you? Hold that thought, because only by appreciating what the MP5 engineering has done, then you will have a better answer to this. So for that, you can watch that one right here.